to continue this assignment. There are two people, Michelle and Myra, and they each write an equation to describe the effect of giving away 3 t-shirts as a promotion in that raffle. And Michelle writes her equation this way because Marilyn is giving away 3 shirts, so she has 3 fewer shirts to sell. So instead of selling T number of shirts, she's selling T minus 3. So she's going to make 3 shirts less money. And Myra writes it this way. The cost of giving away 3 shirts is $45 because each shirt's $15. And so she's going to calculate the total number of dollars brought in for all the t-shirts that could have been sold, and then she's going to subtract out the $45. So that, as it turns out, these are equivalent equations. Your job here is to show that that's true. So you may either go this route, and you can start with Michelle's equation, and you can distribute 15 times t and 15 times negative 3. So 15 times t and 15 times negative 3. And I think you'll see that it is equivalent to this. Or you can take the alternate route, and you can start with this equation, and you can do something called factoring. So if you look at this part of the equation, you might notice that 15 is divisible by 15, and negative 45 is divisible by 15. So if you think about it that way, that tells you what you could pull out of 15 and what you could pull out of or divide out of negative 45. So if you take this route, the factoring route, what you're doing is you are deciding what you can factor out, so what you could divide out of 15. Well, 15 can be divided out of 15. Okay? And negative 45 divided by 15 also comes out to a nice little integer, right? So you can also write this way. So what you would do is you would write g of t, and then you would write what number you're factoring out of both numbers and put that here. And then in parentheses, you would write what's remaining of these numbers after you divide. So in here in parentheses, you would write down what 15t divided by 15 is. And remember, 15 over 15 is 1. So the 15 over 15 part will become 1. And then you'll also write down what negative 45 divided by 15 is. And once you have this term in the parentheses and this term in the parentheses, I think you'll notice that it looks awfully similar to something that you have over here. So you may go either direction. You may start with this equation and distribute, or you may start with this equation and factor out a common factor from each of these terms. Whichever way you go, if you start with this equation, you should end up with this one. If you start with this equation, you should end up with this one. And please put your work here, or you can type it, or you can draw it, or you can copy and paste a screenshot. Now, here's the question for you. How many t-shirts does Marilyn now need to sell to earn $100? Remember, she's giving away 3 shirts. So she's giving some things away, so she's going to have to sell more to make the same amount of money. So use the graph to answer this question and use an equation to answer this question. So when you're using an equation, you may choose either this one or this one. And what you're trying to figure out is, what does t have to be if I want g of t to equal 100? So if you go this route, you're going to be solving this equation. And if you go this route, you're going to be solving this equation. Now, since, let's use this one as the example. If you choose to do this example, you could start by distributing the 15 times t and the 15 times -3, or you could start by dividing both sides by 15. It's up to you. If you go this route, I think the sensible choice is, since we're trying to get t by itself, our first step is we are going to get 15t by itself. Then as a second step, we'll get t by itself. But our first step is we want 15t to be alone on one side of the equation, so we need to get rid of this -45 or -45. So think to yourself, what's the opposite of -45? What's the opposite of -45? And I think you'll say that the answer is +45. And remember, whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you must also do to the other side. So we're going to add 45 here too, over on the left-hand side of the equal. So now where we're at, if we combine like terms, these are both constant numbers, no variables, so we can combine them. We have 145 equals 15t. And now it's 15t plus 0, because these two terms, when you add them together, equals 0. So we have 15t over here. To go the next step, this means 15 times t. So if t and 15 are multiplied, the opposite is to divide them, to divide something. And you always want to divide by the number that you're trying to get rid of, to leave the variable by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by 15. Remember, 15 over 15 is 1, so we're left with t over here, and I will let you do the final calculation of what is 145 divided by 15. And that is going to be your answer, kind of, for how many t-shirts Marilyn needs to sell to earn $100. But remember, can you really sell part of a t-shirt? So think about how many she actually needs to sell to make $100 or more, okay? How much does she need to sell to get up to or just past $100? Then what you're going to do also is look at the graph to get that same information. So here explain if you use the equation, and then here explain how you would know if you use the graph. So go back to the graph and imagine that she needs to earn $100. So she needs to get up to this point, right? She needs to reach this line. And we're talking about the pink graph. So how many shirts, if this is where she needs to hit, how many, if you follow that point down to your x-axis, how many shirts does she need to sell to get to this point where she's earning at least $100? And explain how you figured that out right here. Then, in this table, you're looking at the different components of the equations. So you see these two equations here. There's Michelle's g of t, or her function called g, and there's Myra's function named g. So we're looking at those components of these different forms of the equation. So we're going to look at the 15, we're going to look at the t minus 3, we're going to look at the g of t, we're going to look at when you have the 15 and t multiplied together, and we're going to look at this negative 45 when we distributed the 15 times negative 3. So we're going to look at all these different parts and analyze what they mean. So the first part is you look at each expression, each part, and decide, what is that? What does that mean in terms of units? So for this column, you're either going to be talking about money in dollars, or you're going to be talking about the number of shirts. So for each of these expressions, you decide, is it about shirts or dollars? Shirts or dollars? Shirts or dollars? What is each one of these things? What's the unit? Shirts or dollars? And then in this column, it's the contextual meaning. That means, what does this mean in our situation? So for example, T is our t-shirts, right? That's why we chose T. So you'll go here and you'll decide which one of these does T represent in our situation. And we already said it's shirts. So which one of these, number of shirts or the number of shirts given away, which one does T represent? G of T, which one of these does G of T represent? Is it the number of shirts given away? Is it the price of one shirt? Is it the total dollar amount earned, or is it the number of shirts sold? So you decide, what does the output of this function tell us? Which one of these four things? Same with the 15. What does the 15 represent between these four choices? Same with the t minus 3. Is it the total number of shirts that Marilyn has to sell or that she possesses? What is it, the number of shirts with the giveaway shirts taken away? Or is it the price after a $3 discount? So you decide. You decide what each of these things means in the situation or in the context. Then here, for mathematical meaning, you decide what it means in math. So t, our variable t, which we said is like an x, is that an input or an output? G of t that we said is like y, is that an input or an output? 15, that's the price per shirt. Which one of these things means the price per shirt? T minus 3, which does that one mean? Same with 15t, same with negative 45. You decide.